Okay, Shvato Gudvach. We are mamish at the end. We're almost there. We're up to 104b1. This is the last daf of Mesechus Eruvin. So we're right at the top of the page. Umebe'er Hakir. The Mishnah told us that the Chachamim allowed drawing water from the Hakir well. Now the other wells, other bodies of water that were discussed in the Mishnah were all wells which were in the Beis Hamikdash vicinity, and therefore it's a rabbinic prohibition that they were dealing with over there. They were dealing with using this tool which made a lot of noise, and that it wasn't that it made the noise necessarily. It was the fact that it was something that there was a concern that a person is going to go ahead and draw water and use it to water plants, etc., etc. There was a rabbinic decree against using the windlass. Windlass? I forgot exactly the term that's used. I'm sorry. What's it called? It was called a windlass. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so however, the Be'er Hakir, there's no well called Be'er Hakir on the Temple Mount, and therefore the Gemara asks, what well are we talking about over here? So my Be'er Hakir, what is this well? Amar Shmuel bar shehikru alad varm b'tiro. The word Hakir from the word like announce or expressed arguments. There's arguments about it, and ultimately they permitted it. What does this mean? What this means is that when the Jewish people were exiled from the land of Israel after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, comes along Darius after 70 years and says you can come back, you could rebuild. Unfortunately, many Jews stayed back, and the Gemara has some very negative words to say about the fact that the Jews held back. However, the Jews that did come back, they were traveling, and they come to Shabbos, and they have to travel. They have to stop somewhere in Israel, and they stop. There's no water. There's nothing around. The only thing, they have some water over there, but they're gonna have to use this tool, this windlass, in order to draw the water, and that's normally rabbinically prohibited. And so they argue back and forth: would it be allowed for this circumstance? Because why are they coming back to Israel? They're coming back to settle the land, to build the Beis Hamikdash again, and that is a mitzvah. That's a big deal. Maybe the rabbinic prohibition should be waived, and ultimately they permitted it. Okay, so the Gemara says that is the Be'er Hakir, the Hakir well. Meisvei, the Gemara asks from a brisa on this explanation. Lo kol habaros hakiros hitiru elazol b'vad. They did not permit all Hakir wells, only this one. So the Gemara says that there are clearly many Hakir wells, but only this one was permitted. So if you want to say that the reason it's called the Hakir Hakir well, is because of the fact that they argued over it. My Zobelvad, what does it mean? Only this one. Other wells that were argued about, they did not allow, but this one they did. Like, what other arguments? That doesn't make any sense. Ella Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Be'er Mayim Chaim. Rather, Be'er Hakir means it's another word for a well of flowing water. That's what it means. It refers to Hakir, means to flow. Shneimar, the pasuk says, Hakir Bayer Mimaz, a wellspring causes its waters to flow. Okay, so basically what the Mishnah is then telling us is that there were many many flowing waters. The Bryce is telling us there's many wells which have underground sources, flowing water. Nonetheless, only this well was allowed. Why? Again, for this reason, because they were on their way back to rebuild this land of Israel. Gufa. Now we go back to the text of the Brisa. Local They did not permit all Hakir wells, only this one. When the exiles went up to the land of Israel, they camped beside this well. And the prophets among them permitted them to use it on Yom Tov. Then the Gemara says, qualifies that, or kind of argues with the Brisa and says, Lo Nevi'im Shebeneim. It wasn't actually a reference to the prophets. We know the number of prophets who went with them. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. Or rather, Elamina Gabosam Biyadam Bidehem. The way this is translated by the commentators is that the rabbis who were with them actually permitted it. And that's very why is the Gemara coming to make this distinction? I would theorize that there is an idea mentioned by Rav Tzadok that during the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, halacha was decided by the Nevi'im. During the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, it was decided by the Chachamim. It was like a new era where it was no longer decided by Nevi'im, but rather the Chacham are the ones who did so. So I wonder if what the Gemara is doing over here is making that exact point, that it would be inappropriate to say as they're returning to Yerushalayim, as they're returning to Eretz Yisrael during this time where they're going to rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash, it is no longer the Nevi'im who are there to paskin, rather it is the Chachamim. Okay, now the Gemara continued, last Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us about a sheretz, a creature which is found, a dead sheretz which is found in the Beis Hamikdash. It has to be removed. It has to be removed because it's tummy. Okay, now there's two things that we are going to discuss. One is that the question is how to remove it, even during the weekday. The second thing we want to discuss is that on Shabbos, the dead sheretz is muksa. A live sheretz would be muksa, but a dead sheretz is certainly muksa. It has no function, has no use, and therefore to pick it up would be a rabbinic prohibition. So first, let's talk about a question that has to be dealt with even during the week. Sheretz a sheretz is found in the Beis Hamikdash. Kohen motzio behem yano. The Kohen removes it with his sash, with his belt, his avnit. Okay, so basically takes his belt, takes it off his waist, and wraps up the sheretz, the rat, the rodent, whatever it is, and he grabs it, throws it outside the Beis Hamikdash area. Okay, why? Shlo shahos es tuma, in order to not prolong the presence of tuma in the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, that's a very easy, quick, simple, and efficient way to get rid of the sheretz. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'tzvas shal eitz shelo rabos tuma. He says no, the way it should be removed is with wooden tongs. Wooden tongs are basically two sticks. They are something which is not mekabel tuma. So we're not going to get into all the laws of what is able to be received to and what's not able, but it has to be called a kli, it has to be called a utensil, and something which doesn't have a receptacle, so two tongs, with basically two sticks. You pick up the sherets, you have to go get the two sticks, you pick them up, so it takes a little bit longer than using your belt, because your belt, you're wearing it, and it's very efficient. So here you have to kind of like sushi, chopsticks over here that you're using for this rodent, and you pick it up with the tongs, and then you carry it out, and you bring it outside. Okay, why? Because whereas with the belt, what's going to happen is the belt's going to become tamei. These tongs will not become tamei. Okay, I'm Rav no, let's skip the page. Where do they remove it from? They remove it from the Beis Hamikdash itself. Okay, now we have machlokes. This machlokes is specifically about Shabbos. If you find it during the week, what we said above, two opinions: use the tongs or to use your belt. But where on Shabbos do you remove it from? Again, it's muksa. So you're gonna have to the question. Okay, so the Gemara says, according to the Tanakama, which is Rosh Hashanah, he says they move it from the Beis Hamikdash itself, mina ulam, and from the antechamber. So what that means is the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, where the Aron is, and from the place where the menorah, the mizbeach, and the shulchan is. Ulam and Mizbeach, in between the Mikdash and the Mizbeach, okay? That is, basically you have the base of Mikdash ends over here, and then you have some of the courtyard, you have the Mizbeach, and then you have the rest of the courtyard, okay? And those are the words of Rav Shimon Nanas, Rikiva Omer, Kol Makom Shechevin Al Zdono Kares, Vashugasu Chadas, any area, if a person were to enter while Tameh, that you would get Kares if you did it on purpose, or you get a Kabad Chat if you did it by mistake, Misham Matzino, you remove it from there. What that includes is the entire courtyard. Rav Shimon Nanas says only from the place of Mizbeach and inwards. Rav Akiva says the entire place, okay? And any other area on the Temple Mount, you would just cover it with a copper pot, and after Shabbos is over, then you remove it. So Rav Shimon Omer, and these last words are a little bit cryptic. We'll explain them. Explain them, God willing, tomorrow. Where the sages granted you a dispensation and merely gave you what is rightfully yours. So they've not permitted for you to perform biblical violations in the Beis Hamikdash, only that which is prohibited by rabbinic decree. Okay, those two lines saying two separate things we're going to talk about tomorrow, God willing. Amrav Tami Bar Kis Namar Shmuel. Gemara begins by telling us something in the name of Shmuel. Hamachnis Tamei Sheretz L'Mikdash Chayim. If a person brings in something which has become contaminated by a sheretz, you are going to be in violation of biblical transgression. Sheretz Atmo Pater. If you bring in a sheretz itself, you bring in the rodent itself, you're actually exempt. It seems a little counterintuitive, but all of the laws of Tumah are not necessarily things which we could wrap our heads around so well. It's a little bit mystical. But the point is, if you bring the rodent in, the dead rodent in, which is Tamei, you shouldn't do it, but you're not going to be in violation of biblical prohibition. If you bring something which the sheretz came into contact with, which is tamei, then you will be. Where in the world does it come from? My time, because the pasuk Amar Kar, the pasuk says Mizachar and the pasuk that says you have to keep contaminated things outside, you have to kick contaminated things out to the Beis Hamikdash says, it doesn't just say anything which is tamei, it says a male or female has to be sent out. Now we know from tradition it's not limited to male and female, it's many other things. But why does the Torah therefore pick male or female? Why does it say that? So Rav Shmuel interprets this pasuk to mean Mishiyesh L'Tar B'Mikvah, something like a male and female, a person who is able to become tamei and then go into the mikvah and become pure. So that is included. So anything like let's say you have a piece of clothing that came into contact with the sheretz, so then you could take that piece of clothing and immerse it in the mikvah, you could purify it and it'll become pure. So that is something which you'll also be chayav for, because just like Zachar and Nekeva, just like the male and female, that is the thing which is you're in violation of by not sending it out. So too, anything which is able to come tahar after become tamei. What does that exclude? That excludes the sheretz itself. The sheretz cannot become purified. There's no way of purifying the sheretz itself, right? There's a famous statement that Chachamim make that a person who does tshuva while still being guilty of the sin, it's called being tovel. It's like it's immersing with a sheretz, with a rodent biyado in the person's hand. Okay, so that's Shmuel's learning. Shmuel's limud. Misheyesh Torah mikvah yatz sheretz tahara, to the exclusion of a sheretz which cannot attain tahara. Okay, the Gemara now tries to bring a proof to Shmuel's ruling. Let's try to bring a proof. Mizachar and Nekeva tishlechu. We have a brisa which says, quotes that pasuk. It says from male to female, prat lech licheres, to exclude an earthenware utensil. Okay. So a person brings an earthenware utensil which has come into contact with a sheretz, which is tamei. Nonetheless, you're not in violation of the prohibition of bringing something tamei onto the Beis Hamikdash. To Rabbi Yosef Glili, these are words of Rabbi Yosef Glili. So my time out. What's the reason Rabbi Yosef Glili says that you're not in violation if you bring a kli cheres? La mishum deleis leitar mikvah. Isn't it not because kli cheres, the earthenware vessel, has a number of unique properties when it comes to tum and tara and many other things, kashrus and immersion when you buy it from a non-Jew. But one of the things is that if it becomes tamei, you have no way of purifying it. If it becomes tamei, kli cheres, an earthenware vessel becomes tamei, you basically break it. It's done. You cannot purify it. So this would seem to be a support to Shmuel's halacha. That's exactly what Shmuel said. Zachar and Nekeva, specifically something which is able to be purified, exclusion of a sheretz, the rodent itself. So similarly, a earthenware vessel, maybe that's the reason Yosef Glili says an earthenware vessel can't be you'll not be in violation because an earthenware vessel is something which cannot become purified. The Gemara says, "Lo mishanasa avatuma." It's no. The reason earthenware vessel is excluded is for a different reason. It's like a zachar and a keva, like a male and female, in the sense that that something which could become an avatuma, man and woman are able to become an avatuma. Avatuma is one of the highest levels of impurity. Whereas a earthenware vessel can never become an avatuma. Why? We're not going to get into right now, but the point is that is the reason that it is excluded, and that's what's being learned from Mizachar and Nekeva possibly, and therefore we don't necessarily have a support to Shmuel, and now we're going to actually bring two points that seem to argue with Shmuel. So first the Gemara says, let's say that Shmuel's ruling, Shmuel's an Amora, he comes from the Gemara era, maybe it's contingent on a dispute between Tanaim, which is never something which is comfortable with the Amoram. The Amoram always want to say they agree to both opinions of the Tanaim. So what is the view of the Tanaim? Sheretz Shneim Samdik Mikdash. The first machlok is in our Mishnah, which says that if a sheretz was found in the temple, Kohen Motzi Ben Biano, the Tanakama says that it should be removed with his belt. So the Shaus is a tumah, so that tumah does not be prolonged in the Beis HaMikdash area. These are words of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Yehuda Omer, B'tzavashal Eitzim Motzio. You remove it with wood and tongs. Shelo Rabbis the tumah, so that there's not an increase in tumah. What are they arguing about? What is the basis of their debate? Amanda Amar Shelo L'Shaus. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says that the main priority is not to prolong it. Okay, should have turned my ringer off. Not to prolong it. Sorry, I lost my okay. Rabbi said that the main priority is not to prolong the presence of Tumah is because of Machlis Sheretz Mikdash Chayiv. It's because he holds that bringing Sheretz into the Beis HaMikdash is something you would be Chayiv for, not like Shmuel. He holds that it's something you would be Chayiv for, and therefore he says, well, since you're Chayiv for bringing it in, you also are obligated to remove it. And over here, if I see the Sheretz, I'm obligated to remove it. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says, quick, grab your belt. Even though you're going to contaminate your belt, doesn't matter. You can't be in violation of a lav, and that's why he's so adamant about doing it so quickly. So the Tanakam, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, holds that you would be in violation of the lav. Uman Amar Shelo L'Rabbos, and Yehuda says that no, you can leave it there, go get the tongs, go pick it up, so you don't increase. He holds he would hold that bringing a sheretz into the Beis HaMikdash, you're exempt like Shmuel. So basically what would come out is that the machlokas in our Mishnah is revolving around Shmuel's halacha. The Tanakhama is not agreeing to Shmuel, saying that you are in violation of a lav if you bring in a sheretz, and therefore you have to remove it right away if you find one. Or Yehuda says no, you're not in violation, and therefore you don't have to remove it right away. The Gemara says lo d'kulei mechayev. Maybe you could actually say that no one agrees to Shmuel. Really, everyone agrees that bringing a sheretz you would be liable. Shmuel said you're not liable. Everyone agreed you are liable. What are they arguing about? One, the machlok is not about whether or not you're chayiv. The question is, okay, definitely you're chayiv. The question is, okay, now that you know you're chayiv and you're obligated to remove it, what's the best path of removing it? One says the best way to do so is do it as quickly as possible, no matter what consequences there are, no matter what collateral damages there is to remove it. The other one says, no, you don't, yes, you have to remove it, and you have to remove it quickly, but if you're going to go and increase tumah, that's a bad thing, and therefore, wait an extra few minutes to grab those tongs, pick it up, awkwardly with those tongs, and remove it, and it's better to wait, but both would actually agree that you are going to be chayiv. Okay, so the Gemara says, Elakahanitznai. Maybe the next machlokas in the Mishnah is actually contingent on the machlokas. Shmuel's ruling is contingent on the second dispute of our time in the Mishnah. It's on the Mishnah. We had a debate as to from where do you remove the sheretz? Right? So the Tanakhama said up until the Mizbeach, right? Rishon bananas, and Rekiva said even through the courtyard. What are the arguments? The one who says that not from the entire courtyard, would hold that having a sheretz in the Beis HaMikdash area, you are exempt. And so the only reason you remove it from the Mizbeach and on is because it's inappropriate to have it there. But there's no violation of a law, and therefore in the area of the avoda, in the area that you do the service of the Beis HaMikdash from the Mizbeach and on, it's inappropriate for this to be there, and therefore you should remove it. But from the area past that, the area of the courtyard, since there's no violation and it's not going to get into the way of your avoda, therefore just leave it. Okay, Manam Rikula Azar and Rabbi Kiva said you remove it even from the courtyard because the Rechai would hold that you are violating a prohibition by bringing a sheretz in, not like Shmuel, and that's why you have to remove it even from the courtyard. So maybe they're arguing about Shmuel's halacha, and the Gemara says no, really, maybe no one holds like Shmuel. Everyone holds you are going to be chayiv. It's forbidden to bring a sheretz into this rodent into the Beis HaMikdash, but rather what they're arguing about is where exactly is the prohibition. Again, when we know there's a prohibition about bringing tumah to the Beis Hamikdash. Where does that prohibition end? And well, where does it end or where does it begin? So Amar Yochanan says, they both learn it from the same pasuk. The pasuk, a fascinating little backstory to this pasuk over here. Chizkiyahu was one of the great righteous kings. His father Achaz was a terrible idolater, and he filled the Beis Hamikdash with idols. Idols are tamei, idols, and he brought all these contaminated things into the Beis Hamikdash. When Chizkiyahu took over, he wanted to clean out the Beis Hamikdash, and he sent the Kohanim to go clean the Beis Hamikdash. So what's the procedure? The Kohanim went into the interior of the Beis Hamikdash in order to purify it, and they brought everything out, and they left it in the courtyard. And the Leviim took it outside the Kidron Valley. Okay, so we know the Levium took over removing the Tumah items from the courtyard. So why is that? So we're going to see there's two interpretations. Mar Savar Mishnani Bazar Balvium. The fact that Rav Shimon Anas holds that since the change was made in the temple courtyard, right, in the courtyard itself, from the Kohanim to Levium, Tumah Bazar Aleka, that means that there is no prohibition, there's no issue of Tumah in the courtyard. In other words, the Kohanim, they took it out of whatever area was Tameh. And therefore, they took it anywhere in that area, and they said, okay, we have to leave it from the place that's Tameh. Okay, the place that cannot have Tumah. Therefore, they put it in the courtyard, because in the courtyard, once you get past this Mizbeach, there's no issue of Tumah. And that's why they left it there, and that's what Levium took over. Mar Savar. Okay, Marsavar adhecha delo efshar b'Leviim. Rabbi Kiva says the opposite. He says really the Leviim should have been doing this whole thing of cleaning. Really, Leviim are the busy bees. They're the worker bees. They're the ones who are supposed to be doing the work. They should have went into the base of Mikdash itself to go in. However, the problem is the Leviim are not supposed to go past the Mizbeach, and that's why the Kohanim entered over there. But But once it was possible for the Leviim to get involved, meaning in the courtyard, this has nothing to do. Rabbi Kiva says nothing to do with where are you going to be in violation of bringing a sheret, bringing tummy things onto the base of Mikdash. Really, you shouldn't bring them anywhere. But the point is, the Leviim are the ones who are supposed to be removing it. The problem was they couldn't remove it. They can't go past the Mizbeach, and therefore the Kohanim had to get involved. Once the Kohanim no longer had to get involved because the Leviim are able to go past the Mizbeach, at the area before the Mizbeach. Therefore, the Leviim took over at that point. And so really, they're just arguing about how to interpret these psukim. But there is no debate according to this interpretation. Everyone seems to disagree with Shmuel, and that's where the Gemara seems to land. The Gemara doesn't say so definitively, but it seems like the Gemara is rejecting Shmuel's halacha and saying that a sheret itself cannot be brought to the Temple Mount, and you'd be in violation of a lav to do so. Okay, we are Mirz Hashem going to finish Masechus Eruvin tomorrow morning. For those listening, we are going to start learning tomorrow at 7:30 because it's going to be a little shorter, and we'll make a siyum, God willing, the week after. Have a great day. Good night. Good vach. Shvat tov.